The people that are most successful are the most dialed in with the community, and they have a lot of relationships. They're all long-term visionaries.
Like, what do you guys look for?
You have to know just the basics of it. You also have to understand a lot of times when you're doing land development, you need to know what's being built around you, right? Like it might all look like it's just raw vacant land.
Do you have any rules of thumbs as
We'll structure it in a way where, again, we're not looking to put down much cash on it until it's for sure entitled and we're good to go on the zoning.
Like, what systems do you have in place as a team to guard against motivated reasoning?
In the land space, you want to go find people that are experts in what they do. It took us a lot of time, but we built a team around us of people that specialize.
Welcome back to another episode of the Residual Real Estate Agent Podcast. We have with us an investor, a developer, right, out of Arizona who's here to talk to us about new land development and construction. His name is BJ Gremillion, and I'm making millions doing what I'm doing. We really appreciate you taking the time to be here and share with us, brother.
You bet. Love the intro.
Aaron, you missed the dynamic, powerful, dynamic
Right.
BJ Gremillion. Rockstar.
Yeah, luminary, legendary.
Dude, my ego is just blowing up right now. Thank you.
Hey, we don't want to pump him up too much. He might want to charge us for this, Aaron. So we might want to stop right here.
Right.
Just pull it back a little bit,
We're going to get a bill in the mail if we keep it up. EJ, so we wanted to bring you on just because we get a lot of questions from people looking to get into land development and looking to get into brand new construction. I have never personally done a land development deal. I know clients that have, but I wanted just to bring you on and kind of share some insight on that. So let's start right off. Like, what's the first thing you look for if you want to get into a land development deal?
Sure. I mean, just a little bit of background, I guess, on our journey, on how we got into the land space. We started off doing the fix and flips 2008, have a business partner. His name's Brad Young, here in the Phoenix market. And, so we were buying homes on the court steps and we were doing that whole thing and did that for about 5 years for investors. And then we started doing it for ourselves and flipping homes and understanding that. And then it was in 2014, 2015 that we started looking at the possibility of picking up some land that, land, nobody was paying attention to land at all. It's one of the reasons actually why I enjoy the land space is because, for every 20 flippers, there's, or 50 flippers, there's one person that does land. So it does help that there's not as much competition. Anyone that knows Arizona market right now, I mean, it's kind of the wholesaler capital of the world, and so it's very saturated. Similar to, I'm sure, California, Florida, Vegas, those other markets as well. So you guys, I'm sure, know what I mean there. But yeah, I mean, it was just something that we more or less fell into, where we're buying some homes, and nearby these homes there's some vacant land and some of these infill lots. And so we looked at those, and my business partner actually has a background in construction. His dad had his contractor license. They're from Texas. He had just moved up to Arizona and really needed something to do for work. And so we were like, hey, let's go ahead and try one where we'll buy the land and build a spec and see how that goes. And then, it's just kind of gone from there. And we've been, much more intentional about it over the past 2 years now. So that's kind of some of the background. But I think to your question about, how do people that are interested in the land space get into, the development space? I mean, real estate's very broad, right? That's one of the, I think, downfalls, honestly, of real estate can be the shiny object syndrome, right? That everyone looks at all these different opportunities and you can go wide really fast. And so that's something that we have experienced. And it's something, honestly, we work on still to this day. We just actually had a meeting this past week where it was like, hey, we need to focus on 2 or 3 aspects of real estate versus 5 or 6. And so land is one of those that, in a very good market like we're in right now, that's appreciating like crazy. It's appreciating very quickly and it's a great place to be in, but it's also going to be the first place that'll go, right? So, I mean, if you own raw dirt and it's not entitled, and then there's not really anything you can do with it. you're stuck with a piece of dirt that you can't move. And so it's also a very risky place to be. And I think that's probably why a lot of people are turned off from getting real estate, so, or into land development. So
I'm taking notes as we're speaking. The first one is that, I mean, you have a lot of experience. You did the fix and flips. You got into the land space specifically because there was less competition, you noticed, and you're having to compete with less people. It also comes with more risk. So my question to you would be is like, how do you hedge that risk?
for us, it's been nice to obviously have a couple other channels of income. The people that are all in one, space, especially if they're all in just development alone, and they're putting all their eggs in that basket, I'd be very worried for them, just because, again, I mean, if the market turns, and we're looking at it right now, right? I mean, we got the war going on, and inflation happening, and all sorts of uncertainty, and so it can turn on a dime. And when that happens, again, you got to be in a position where you're okay, you can pivot. So some of the things that we have done personally, we have an earthworks division. That's one thing that we've done to create consistent income. And so what that means is we're able to go and build pads, for example, for people that are looking to build their home, or any commercial space or whatever. So we can go in, we have a process set up. We're probably one of the least expensive people out here, because we operate at a very efficient rate, and so we're able to do 3 or 4 of these pads every week. And so that would be our consistent, reliable income. And we're doing this alongside some of the larger developments that we're doing as well. And so it helps to have both.
I would want to start is like, I mean, I get clients who down here want to buy pieces of land. Some of the pieces of land look like a very good price, but maybe they don't have any utilities, they don't have any electricity, they don't have any water. Like, what do you guys look for whenever you guys looking for stuff in the city, outside of the city? Or are you guys just going based on price? Are you guys building things with views? What does that look like?
Another big aspect of land is, just like in when you're fixing and flipping a home, it's important to understand the demographics, the location. You have to understand the values. It's probably even more so important when it comes to land. You have to know just the basics of it. You also have to understand, a lot of times when you're doing land development, you need to know what's being built around you, right? Like, it might all look like it's just raw vacant land, but if you know a lot of the people with the city and with the county, and you start to understand, oh, this highway is actually scheduled to go in over here, they're having this meeting at this date, if that goes well, then all of a sudden this land goes from X to Y, and it could be a very huge jump. And so in my experience, in my limited experience, I'm by no means any type of professional in this space. Like, I wouldn't say that I'm some crazy guru, land guy that knows everything. But in my limited time in land development, the one thing that I would say is the people that are most successful are the most dialed in with the community, and they have a lot of relationships, and so they have an understanding of what the potential is. And so really all that I do is I just hang out with the smart people. I'm always constantly looking to have those, take them out to lunch, or go to some of these different events where I know that they're going to be speaking at, just so that I can get close enough to them and just pick their brain for a little bit, because those conversations that you typically have just in passing, that you might not think too much of, can make a difference of hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so you just have to be always listening and learning, and trying to understand what the bigger picture is, because land development, it's not the here and now, it's not the fix and flip, it's not like 3 to 6 month type turn stuff. This is you're looking out years. And the really smart guys that are doing really well in the land development space, they're all long-term visionaries, and they understand the long game, where that's been difficult for me to make that transition, because we've always been for so long about the short game.
Yeah, it's interesting because as you were saying that, as soon as you said that, I'm like, well, fixing and flipping is very much so like a short little window of time, 90 days, where you got to like flip it around and get it back on. So what has been, you mentioned it's been a challenge, like specifically, how have you tried to work on that challenge? like make yourself more of a long-term thinker?
One of the things that all of us face that are in real estate is cash flow. And so in land or real in development, you can burn through cash very quickly, the interest on a month-to-month basis. And then it also forces you to get creative. You have to then go find these ways to structure creative financing so that most, again, and I'm just learning from everyone else that's done this at a much higher level, much more successful than I am. But watching what they do that separates them from everyone else is they rarely put their own money down on a deal, especially if it's not entitled. You want to make sure that you have as little risk as possible. And so typically, let's say, for example, it's raw land and you're trying to entitle it and you're trying to rezone or wherever the case may be. It's rare that you're going to find someone that knows what they're doing that will be okay with taking down the land and then working on all of that. Typically, they're going to structure the deal and they'll say, hey, we'll put down a larger earnest amount, whatever the case may be, but we need a much longer inspection period. And we're going to go do all the homework, do all the due diligence, and make sure that this is a slam dunk, that we 100% are going to get approval. And then once we have that, then yeah, great, we'll go ahead and close. But we're not going to do it while we're paying interest and have all this massive amount of risk that if something goes wrong, and it just takes one person, a lot of times, that just some elected official decides that they don't like the idea that you're pitching, and they could shut down that idea, and then you're in trouble. So that's how people go out of business really quickly in that space. The other thing that we are careful about doing is we don't go for these grand slam deals. Like, we're not immediately jumping into a 100-acre project and trying to figure out commercial, because we're typically in the residential space and we're not going way outside of what we're used to. We're taking those baby steps. And so we might start with, let's do one rezone on a 2-acre piece and see if we can get it down to 10,000 square foot lots, and let's see how that goes. And trust me, like the first time that we did that, we made every single mistake I'm positive that you could possibly make on a deal. We made sure to hit every single one of those mistakes, but it was on a much smaller scale. And still, at the end of the day, we actually still made money on it, which was, comforting to know, okay, like, you can do this completely backwards and wrong. And it also helps that we're in an economy that obviously is very forgiving right now. Because that's the other thing. If we were in just even a normal economy, we probably would have lost $100,000 on the deal. But then, of course, we end up making a couple $100,000 on it. And that, again, it took us 2.5 years when really it should have only taken us like 8 to 10 months.
A couple things I heard before you ask the next question, Jose, is like, just for everybody who's listening, that it clearly there's more, I mean, there's a risk component. And what you've been doing intentionally and purposefully with you and your partners is you're mitigating that risk as much as possible. One, by diversification, as far as like cash flow streams, where you have a separate reoccurring source of revenue, like a business that produces cash on a regular basis. And then two, as a hedge, you're not trying to like swing for the fences where, like, if this one thing happens and all the stars align and all the officials say okay, then we're going to be like, make a ton of money. It's like, no, we're starting with small to medium sized deals that are a little bit more forgiving as far as errors. Is that right?
Yeah.
That's super important for people to pay attention to.
So BJ, for the viewers who are maybe not as familiar, what does entitled mean and what does rezoning mean? Just for maybe somebody that's just starting off.
So a lot of times, it's funny. I think that there are a lot of people, which actually surprised me. We're in the same mastermind together, and there's some investors that actually specialize in finding land that's in the middle of nowhere, right? Like in the middle of the desert, doesn't have any utilities or anything like that, but it's going to be super cheap, obviously. And there are people that buy it, and it's crazy to me. It blows my mind that actually exists. But I think that there's just this piece of in our brain that just, people like to think, hey, I got this piece of dirt that maybe one day, once the freeways go in and all this kind of stuff, all the ifs happen, then it's going to be worth all this money, and that's going to be our big ticket to financial freedom or whatever. So it's funny to me that there are those people, because when it comes to entitlements and zoning, really, if what it basically is there's a piece of dirt and the zoning department, and it's decided by, several different factors, but it's really just at like the municipality level where they decide, okay, here's our master plan for this city or county. Here's what we have, and it's, zoned differently. So you have your commercial spaces, you have your industrial, you have your residential, and then there's different, levels to each one of those, obviously. And so a lot of times you'll find some land, that is out in the middle of nowhere, and it has not been designated for any of that, right? So it's zoned as either agricultural or just vacant. And so there's no zoning to it at that point. And so it really could be anything. And that's the stuff that's just not worth much at all, right? But the minute that you're able to take that and, rezone it to, let's say that it's nearby a development, and this is a lot that we do quite a bit of this, where we'll go to like the outskirts areas where, all the development is heading, but we're not by any means, in the middle of the city. So these outskirt areas, we're able to take this land, and of course, the county and the city, they look at tax revenue and they look at rooftops, and they say, okay, in the residential space, the reason why we see so many developers coming in and proposing, hey, there's land that currently is zoned for 1 acre minimum residential, they can take that space and instead rezone that to have, let's say, R6, which is a 6,000 square foot lot. And so in Arizona, and I'm sure Florida and California, you guys see the same thing. I mean, there's just all these subdivisions with these, rezones that have taken place where they took these farms that were, zoned agricultural, and then they were able to go through the process. And it normally takes 12 to 18 months, depending on the situation, depending on the municipality and a lot of other factors. But, they spend the money, time, and effort to go and, meet with the different officials. They have to have a public hearing. You have to go, there's a pretty long process. You have to give a proposal. You have to spend the money on, showing them, here's what our vision is, here's what our plans are, so that they can sign off on that. And really the money is made as soon as you get that stamp of approval and they say, okay, now it went from a farm to it is now zone R6, let's say, and you can fit 200 homes on, these 40 acres. Now you turn around and you go to the contractors and say, hey, guess what? We've already done all the work. We are set to go. It's already been signed off on. It's approved. Here you go. Now that land went from, let's say, $50,000 an acre on that. Well, now it's probably going to be worth, closer out here. It would be closer to like 750 to $1 million per acre, once it's entitled that way. So there's a ton of money in that. It's just, so if you understand, how to go through that process, and you have people in place that can do that in a timely manner and efficiently, you can see obviously the opportunity to make quite a bit of money is absolutely there.
Once you get that stamp, you're doing the happy dance. That's for sure, right?
Yes.
And that's a way to mitigate, or one of the ways that I heard this weekend, because it was interesting to see how many of the mastermind group that we're in are getting into it, or it's becoming a little bit more popular. One of them said something that the way that they're doing it is just like you said, they make an offer on the property, they put a higher deposit, they get it entitled during the escrow process. So you're not closing on it unless you get it entitled. And once you get it entitled, now at that point it's worth a lot more. So that's how you're mitigating the risk. And in some cases, some of the investors are even selling it just entitled, and some of them are going through the development process as well too. And they talked about, one of them talked about how they make it like a 10,000 non-refundable deposit, but they're talking about it like if you do that on 10 pieces of properties, one hits, yeah, you have $100,000 into it. But if one of those hits, that development could be worth millions and millions of dollars. And now the other ones you didn't close. The mistake that I see is people, and this was something that happened to me. I bought this piece of property with 7 code violations. We met with the city. The city basically said, yeah, no problem. You should be approved in 6 months, 8 months. Everything that they told us, they failed to tell us certain things. Literally 4 years later, we finally got it approved, but a 6-month project turned into 4 months. And it was just like anything that they say, it's risky because somebody else can change jobs. Somebody can take over a certain position. Zoning may change. The city may decide that development that they wanted, they no longer want it. And if you close on that piece of property, now you've got all this risk associated with it where maybe you have something that's not worth what you thought you had into it. So I thought that was pretty fascinating. And when I heard that, I was like, that's not a bad idea.
Yeah, and the other thing that I'm aware of as we're having this conversation, at least this is my like imagination, is part of the reason why everybody's getting super excited about this and jumping in is because if there's a massive supply and demand problem, and because there's such a shortage of like affordable housing or just housing in general, and we see this, Jose, where we get 35 properties on a residential resale home, right? And people are removing appraisal contingencies and finance contingencies and inspection contingencies just to try to get into a property. But it sounds as though, like my observation is part of the reason why this is perhaps people are starting to pay attention to it is because they're seeing the supply dynamic situation. And because they're seeing that supply dynamic situation, there's an opportunity.
Yeah. And what's really interesting to your point, what has made the situation of supply and demand even worse is, when COVID happened, and this is something that it's a double-edged sword. And I hadn't thought about it this way until I was actually listening to, I think it was a Bigger Pockets podcast, and he brought up a point that I'd never thought about. And it's actually pretty cool how it all worked out. So yes, there's a supply and demand issue. COVID happened. So what do? They, of course, reduce the amount of staff that they have at the counties. And so they got a skeleton crew working it. So you have this huge supply issue. Contractors know there's an issue. They all want to build homes like crazy, developers and everything. And so they're all, chomping at the bit, trying to get out there and build these homes. But yet there was this constraint on approval because, there was no one there and we saw this in Arizona. There are several counties that are we actually won't even build in because they're so far behind that we don't have the ability to sit on these projects for the length of time that it can take, because it can take over a year, just to get the approval. So yes, it's frustrating because obviously they're not able to move forward and build all these homes, but it has actually had a revert. It's actually been, I think, helpful overall to the economy to not allow us to do what happened in 2005 and 2000, really 2004 to 6, where really they just rubber stamped every single thing that came across their desk, and they just let builders go gangbusters. And so they built a ton of homes, oversaturated the market, way overshot it to the point where obviously, the Big Short, right? Then all of a sudden, all these homes were just sitting there. There weren't enough bodies that could qualify to purchase these homes. And so, it's actually funny enough, and it frustrates us, trust me, to no end if we're not able to get our projects moving forward. But I think it's actually, been just this constraint that's kept us from being able to repeat the same thing that we did in 2004 through 2006 or 7. So just something that I'd never thought of in that way, because I'm always on the side of, man, why can't they get their act together? I wish they could just hire more people. There's all these people that need homes and we need to build it for them. But there is a flip side to it. So
yeah, that's typically the way I look at it sometimes. Because in California, BJ, they're putting all kinds of rent control in all the cities, and that's in my opinion, it's not the problem is supply and demand. The more supply there is, the lower the rents will be because landlords would have to be more competitive. So I look at that like if they approve things faster, there wouldn't be that much of a housing shortage. But what I wanted to ask you is, how do you underwrite the deals? Like whenever you're looking at a piece of land, do you look at price per square foot of what you're going to build? Do you have any rules of thumbs as to, okay, you should pay for the land 20% of the after building value, or this is how much you can account for price per square foot all in? If you can kind of give us some rules of thumb there, I think that would help people.
It is a different beast. It's I don't have as many rule of thumbs when it comes to land purchasing, but what I will say is we're very conservative. We've always been that way. It's just, and so I think where people get in trouble when it comes to land is they're assuming the best. So you always, just like in any investment that you make, right? Like whenever you're fixing and flipping a home, you have to look at that investment as, okay, worst case, I cannot sell this. Can I rent it out for the payment that I'm making and be okay, right? So you need to always have plan B or C, kind of worst case scenario. And so it's very similar with the land. We'll structure it in a way where, again, we're not looking to put down much cash on it until it's for sure entitled and we're good to go on the zoning. That's the first piece of it. So if we can get the seller to agree to carry it for that period of time, and we'll make it sweet for them. Like you can always structure the deal so that a lot of times we say, hey, we'll pay you 8% interest, for this year that we're working on that process, but we're going to wrap that into the price right at the end. So we're not going to be making those payments, for the first year, but you will get more money for allowing us, to work on this. Plus, it's going to benefit you, Mr. Seller, because you currently have this piece of dirt. We're doing all the heavy lifting. Worst case scenario for you, we fall out and we're not able to close on it. Well, guess what? Now you have some land that's worth more than it was before you met us. And so it has to be a win-win. Like they have to look at it and be like, oh yeah, you're right. There's not really much downside, to this. And then don't assume the best ever, right? Like anytime we underwrite a deal, we always look at it very conservative. Okay, what are the land values today? What are people paying for raw dirt today? And then what are they paying for the house that, the spec home, because we also do construction as well. And so, I look at all those factors whenever we're, making an offer on something. And again, as little money as I can pay for the dirt, the better. And I'm more than happy to load it on the back end. They'll actually make more money by just waiting, for let's say a year to get their money if that's a possibility. And so it's really the way that I've just structured it is more so of a long-term play for them. Because what you'll notice with landowners, most of them, they're not like your homeowners, right? Where they have this motivation to sell and they have to sell their home so they can go buy another home, or there's typically a timeline involved. Most people that own land, they usually have inherited the land. Let's say it's been in their family for 100 years, so they're just paying the taxes on it. It's not like it's killing them. And so, but you do bring that up. You're like, hey, you've been paying taxes. I don't know if you realize it's adding up, and it's been 50 years since you own this thing, and it's going up every year. So how about this? We'll go ahead and take care of your tax liability while we're under contract as well. So it, you remove that pain factor. And so there's multiple ways you can go about it, but there are some nuances to it that are different than when I'm making an offer for like a single family home, for example.
That makes sense. So what I'm realizing, like, as we have this conversation, essentially what you're doing is creatively structuring like an option to purchase where it's like, I put it on the back end. I'll give you all this stuff. I'll make it good for you. And basically what I'm paying for is time. And it's the time to try to figure out if we can get this to what we need it to be. And if we can, great. But if not, I'm out. And I'm going to try to keep as little amount like at risk as possible. Now, the other thing I'm interested in, because you had said assuming the worst, and what it makes me think about is like wishful thinking or motivated reasoning, which is like with motivated reasoning is where like I'll ignore all evidence to the contrary if I want something to be true or I believe it's true. And I know you have to, everybody, myself, Jose, you, like, we all have to guard against that because it's part of our kind of thinking mechanism and apparatus that we can fall into that. So like, what systems do you have in place as a team to guard against motivated reasoning where somebody comes in, they're like, oh man, this is going to be a slam dunk. And then you're like, wait a minute, like, let's really look at this.
No, I love that you said that, because so the reason why our partnership, I've been working with my business partner now for 14 years. The reason why it's worked out so well for us is because I'm definitely the optimist. I'm not crazy on the optimist scale, but I am for sure. I look at the opportunity. I'm a visionary. And so whereas he is going to be more of the pessimist, worst case scenario, he actually went through some life experiences, growing up that caused him, like when they, their family lost a lot, and so he knows what it felt like. And so anytime we go into any type of business venture, it's nice to have the brakes right there too. And I always, say, hey, what are you seeing that I'm not? Like, play this out. What's the worst case scenario that could happen? So there's that aspect. And then the other piece of it that I would say that I've learned to embrace in the land side of things, whereas in single family homes, when you're fixing and flipping, you don't really need this. But in the land space, you want to go find people that are experts in what they do. So rather than me go, one of the biggest lessons that I learned on our first deal, it was a 2-acre piece, kind of on the outskirts in Apache Junction in Arizona, that we did a rezone on. And, we're putting in 12 homes on 2 acres now. We got the rezone done. But my mistake going into it, first of all, we just closed on it. We didn't even think about doing any type of creative financing in the beginning, any type of option. We just closed on the land. We've been making payments on it that whole time. But the second aspect was I just figured I could go in and walk in and talk to the county and figure out what was the next step and what do I need to do and who do I need to talk to. And I just stumbled my way through it. And it cost us so much more money doing it that way than it would had I just gone, to someone that's what they specialize in. There's a lot of, firms that will help you get, a piece of land entitled. The issue that you're going to come up with, and this is where you have to ask around, you have to find those relationships, that these people are harder to find. If you're just starting out in the space and you're not doing the 100-acre piece, right? You're not like a big corporation, that's building thousands of homes, then you kind of find yourself in this no man's land where it's hard to find someone that's willing to mentor you and take on your project if it's too small. And so we were fortunate enough. It took us a lot of time and effort to make some phone calls and find those people. But we built a team around us of people that specialize in all these aspects. And so what that's done for us is, number one, we're able to, get our projects approved in probably a quarter of the amount of time. And then obviously, number two, even though, yes, you're having to pay quite a bit up front, the amount of money that you save in interest and opportunity costs and all these things far exceeds the cost typically of what you're paying them. And so that was the other big learning thing, because just knowing the way that we operate, it's always been, we'll figure it out and we'll stumble through it. And that's not the way to do it, especially in land development. You will get crushed if you're thinking you're just going to kind of wing it and figure it out as you go. That's the worst approach possible. So just some words of advice, I guess.
Now that you bring that up, one of the things that stood out about the last mastermind that we went to was that who, not how mentality, like meaning like fight. And it's not only for land construction, it's in everything. And Phil Green from our mastermind, right? The guy literally, like anything that he wants to do, he'll find the person that is an expert at it and he'll go talk to them. And I got a buddy by the name of Angel who does the exact same thing. And I'm just like, dude, it is the most brilliant thing that they do. And it's like, and that expert basically handles everything for them. And it's just switching the mentality.
It's so interesting because I remember having a conversation with Angel and we were talking about something, and Angel's like, yeah, I don't want the guy who's like teaching people. I want the guy who taught the guy who's teaching people. Like, that's what I'm looking for. I'm trying to get like the magician behind the curtain of all these other folks, right? That's who I want to get proximity to. So it's just figuring out who that is and then, doing whatever you need to do. And I think, like, to your point, which I think is very valuable, I think sometimes people they're like immature, imagining that there's not going to be a value exchange, where it's like, if you want to get proximity to somebody who's like the guy or gal who's the master at that, you have to add some sort of value. It may be monetary value or it may be some other value, but there needs to be an exchange of value. It's not like, hey man, I'm working really hard, my name's Greg Million, I'm making millions, can you talk to me? Like, no, that's not going to cut it. You have to add some sort of value, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing that everyone falls into the trap of, and we do this all the time, is you look at, well, how much do you charge? And you start the conversation with that. And that is the absolute wrong, backward way of doing it. Because you know what? Most of the guys that are charging the most, they charge that for a reason. They charge it because they're going to get it done in a quarter of the time. You're going to get exactly what you wanted. So just stop focusing so much on what they're charging and what they're making. And that was a mental block, honestly, that we had for a long time. Still do, still working on improving that. But man, if I could say the biggest difference, of, BJ in 2022 versus when I first started in 2008, it's that. Like, yes, I could do it on my own. I could figure it out, but the who, not how, that you brought up, Jose, it could not be more true. Like that's the secret, especially if you want to start unlocking the ability to make real, money.
Grown up money.
Yeah, exactly. Right. the kind of money that's generational. It's typically it's those guys that they just know all the right people. They're in the right networking, group, and then life becomes way more easy. It's just you're not having to grind so much, and things just fall into place. So if you can build a team around, on in anything, just if it's land development or if it's in real estate or whatever, that's the secret.
I'll give a tip for the viewers, BJ. In my area, one of my cities has a list of all of the new construction coming up, and it's applicable to residential, multi-unit, self-storage. So what I did is I started downloading that list, and what that list tells you, it tells you who's the person applying for those permits. And then you start to see pattern. You start to see Aaron Novello, Aaron Novello, Aaron Novello. And you're like, why is this guy applying for all of the permits for all of the development? That might be a guy that you want to go talk to and introduce yourself to, because Aaron Novello might be the guy that understands the process better than anybody else. And that's why they're going to Aaron Novello. So that's just a little tip for the viewers, that it is public data, meaning like all the building permits are public data. And you can actually, if you do a little bit of digging in your market, you can actually find out who the players are, who the BJs in your market are.
That's right. Who the BJ in your market is. And the other thing that comes up for me is what you said, and I see it in all areas, is that evolution is if I'm thinking how much instead of how much am I going to make, I'm thinking wrong. And that's an internal shift. So, for the viewers, just if you find yourself asking yourself, like, how much does this cost? Like, no, I'm asking the wrong question. It's how much can I make?
It's funny. I heard a saying, like, somebody was negotiating with a mechanic, and he asked the mechanic, how long is it going to take you to do it? He's like, oh, probably like 10 minutes. He's like, and you want to charge me $1,000 for 10 minutes? He's like, you're not charging me for the 10 minutes that I'm spending. I'm charging you for all the knowledge that I've acquired over that period of time, to be able to do it in 10 minutes, So it's different. Let's talk about dollars and cents.
Show me the money.
Okay, here we go.
What do you think it costs, like price per square foot right now? Like, I know it varies. Has that gone up over time, and has that affected you in any way, shape, or form? Like, meaning, as a COVID, construction costs went up. What could somebody use maybe as a rule of thumb? Like, in California, I'm thinking, like, I've heard anywhere from 180 a square foot, 150, which to me, that sounds ridiculously low. Then I've heard contractors saying 350 a square foot. What do you think in your market is a reasonable price per square foot to use as a rule of thumb?
Yeah, so if you're talking residential, construction, single family, yeah, but it's in the twos. You have to start in the twos. So we're when we first started out, yeah, like we were looking at how can we get down to like 65 to 75 bucks a foot, right? And it seems like it was so long ago, but I mean, that was only 6-7 years ago that we were having those conversations. And at the time we were probably right around 80 bucks a foot is what we were building these homes for. So yeah, now, I mean, we don't even think about the ones anymore. It's just, you're starting the conversation at like probably 225. Now, again, like anything, economies of scale. So if you start doing larger projects and you're putting up 50 homes versus one or two, then sure, you're gonna save cost and you're gonna get that number down. There's some people in our mastermind group, the betters come to mind. They're great operators and they're in the North Carolina area.
Cava was talking about, I think, like $80 or less than $100 a foot, and I was like, I couldn't believe it.
And that's the difficult thing whenever I give people a price per foot number, is it's just such a loaded question, right? Because the product that they're building in Pennsylvania or in North Carolina, they're actually building homes and they're selling them for, I believe, 180, 150,000 to 200,000, which again, like we cannot buy the land, for that price, right? So it's apples and oranges. And so the type of product that we build is more of the high-end luxury homes. And so our costs, we just have different contractors for what we're doing. They're doing a higher production type build, and we're focusing more on like the luxury side. So we're only throwing up 15 to 20 homes a year, whereas they're doing that probably every quarter.
What's the most creative way you've ever structured a deal with a landowner?
We've kind of run the gamut. I'm sure that there's going to be more. The thing I do love about real estate, I will say, is, I mean, essentially you can write up whatever the heck you want, right? So you can just, whatever your imagination can come up with, typically there's a way to figure it out and make it happen. And so I don't know if I'm like the most creative by any means. Like there's a guy out in our market, Pace Morby. He's in like the creative financing space, and he can talk that until he's blue in the face. And there's some others like Eddie Speed and some other guys that are in that space that are way more creative than I am. For us, it's just always been, how do I mitigate risk? How can I put as little money of my own down as possible? And so recently we just bought like a 40-acre parcel in Queen Creek. And so and this is a example of someone that's owned the land for 100 years. It's been in their family. I'm talking to the, trustee of the estate. And, we had, it as actually, I sent a postcard to him. He reached out to us off of a postcard. And, we talked back and forth for a while. And then we gave him what our vision was for the property. And I think that we were probably the first one that came to him where it resonated, with him, because that's one thing that I've noticed with a lot of these, people that have owned land in their family for years and years, is they want it to be like a legacy. They want to be able to show their grandkids and stuff like, hey, like that was our family land, right? That was our homestead. That was, stuff that we have had in the family for years and years. So they don't want just like to be like a parking garage, right? So if I came to him and I told him, hey, my, goal is to put up some condominiums and we're going to be like everyone else out here in the area, and we're just going to cram in as many homes as we possibly can, then I would not have got the deal, because he had heard that pitch, 1,000 times over. So knowing that, we went to him and said, look, like I have a family, I want to have land, I want to be on at least a half acre, an acre. So we kind of painted that picture for him, what our vision was for the future of this area. And you could just tell that appealed way more to him than the dollars and cents. I never even got into the money side of things until he was totally bought in to what the vision was and what we wanted to do in helping preserve, the land that was in their family for close to 100 years. So that for me, what I've realized in land, and this actually goes really for a lot of different things, but probably more so than anything with land, is just doing that, where you can say, hey, look, this is what I want it to be. The possibilities, they're not endless, because obviously they've got restrictions and you can only, do so many things with them. But if you can go to them and paint a picture and really get them excited about your vision, then the rest is easy. Like the numbers work themselves out. In fact, we had lunch, we sat down together, we talked for an hour, never talked about price at all until the very end. He's like, oh yeah, I guess we should probably, talk about that. What's your offer? And I'm like, well, what do you want? What makes sense for you? And he was like, look, I don't want to be greedy. This is kind of what I'm thinking. And I'm like, great. How do you want to structure it? And so once he was bought in, it was more of a we than, me versus you. And the minute that you realize that you're now on the same team and you're working on a piece together, he still reaches out to me. We closed on it in December. And so now he wants to be a part of it, right? Like he thinks that he has ownership in this, and he does. The land's still technically his, because we did some creative financing where we only had to put down $500,000 on a project that for the land, we should have paid about $7 to $8 million. And then when it's all said and done, if we entitle it and we sell the land, without even having to build, we'll sell it for probably 16 to 17 million. And that's without us having to build or anything like that. And so that again goes to show you that's the difference right there between just having land that's zoned agricultural to once we have the zoning in place and we've done the development work to it, then all of a sudden the value, skyrockets.
Aaron, did you hear that? He said 16 to 17.
I did, bro. I don't know if you saw my face, dude. You know how many homes we would have to sell to get anywhere close to $16 million, man? Good for you, brother. That's why they call him Greg Million.
You know what, dude? It took me a long time to figure that out, because we're all in the same, like I've been doing residential real estate for a long time. So you're right. Like you have to bust it to get hundreds of homes every year that you're selling. And then with land, it's like, yeah, you do one deal and you'll make as much as you did the 10 years prior, right? But you could also lose, just as quickly. So I always throw that in there too, because it's risky.
How did you know to mail to this guy?
All that we didn't do anything unique or special. We just went on Property Stream and looked at raw land. And we went up to like 50 acres, basically anything that was raw, and just sent it out. And it's funny. Some of the biggest deals that we've had have all been through postcards and then in signs. Like if you can get to a piece of dirt when someone's literally hammering in the sign and you can catch them. This is another just quick story. My business partner, to that point, he was driving from one of our other projects, saw one of these old timers that was just hammering in his makeshift sign for sale by owner, right? And he said, "Hey, you know what do you want for the land?" And he gave him a price, and we knew right away. We're like, okay, like that guy's literally giving that away. So we're like, hey, don't list it. Don't worry about putting it on Zillow or anything like that. We'll get you a contract by the time I get back to the office. So we did. He got him a contract for exactly what the guy wanted. And by the time he had got to the office, he already had 2 or 3 phone conversations. And we did a minor land division on those. And so what that is, you know, you can, in Arizona, you can only split a parcel 5 times without needing a full-on public report. And so you can sell to several different people as long as you have an arm's length transaction and they're not related to you or whatever, and you can't touch the same parcel. So we the guy was selling like 20 acres, right? So we split it up into 4 5-acre parcels. And, you know, by the time we got to the office, he'd already called 3 other people, all contractors that we knew, and essentially doubled the price for each one of those. And they all were ecstatic because even then it still had plenty on the, you know, meat on the bone. So that's the advantage of land. If you know what you're doing and you can look for those opportunities, and once you find them, the numbers can be pretty wild.
Anything else?
No, man. I mean, I think this has been educational for me. It's been, hopefully it's been educational for the audience that they're picking stuff up. And clearly BJ is one of those people who knows what he's doing, right? So if people want to find you, or if they had any questions or anything, like, how could they reach you, man?
Our website is thebcteam.com if you want to go on there. And then also our Instagram handle, we do have some content on there, but that's also at the BC team. So
I just wanted to say thank you for obviously coming on here, and thank you for contributing. I know that our audience got a good value. So for all of our viewers out there, this was episode number 107. We had BJ Gremillion here coming to us from Arizona. We just want to say thank you. If you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. That way you can get notified whenever there's future episodes coming up. And if you feel that this episode would help somebody in any way, shape, or form, feel free to hit that share button and send them a link. Thanks again, guys. And BJ, we appreciate you, man. And this guy's a baller, by the way. He can play some basketball as well, too. So,
hey, that was fun. We had a good time. It was good seeing you.